Greetings to all my subscribers, listeners, and followers out there. I am Mark Hasara, the host of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. And for 60 years, my passion has been everything aviation. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we interview some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories. But more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general aviation environments? Our purpose is to show how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. And some of the stories that you're going to hear on the Lessons from the Cockpit show are being told for the very first time. And again, today's one of those days. We're interviewing one of my best college buddies. This episode is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, found on Amazon in all 4 formats. This gives you a behind-the-scenes look at air refueling on a global scale in 4 wars and a number of contingencies too. And there's 32 pictures from the actual events in the book. And at the end of each of the 22 chapters, there's a lesson learned from the story told in the chapter. This is a book I wrote and published in 2017 by Simon & Schuster. Now, they're available on Amazon, but if you contact me through my website at markhasara.com, I now have softback versions of these that I can sign and send to you for $27. So go to my website, markhasara.com. There's a contact sheet there, and reach out to me if you want a copy of the book, personally signed. And when I sign them, I write a paragraph or 2 on the flyleaf. I don't just go, Mark Hasara, have fun, see ya. You get a personal note from me. As I mentioned on today's show, we're interviewing a very dear friend of mine, college buddy. We've known each other since the 80s when we were going to school at Brigham Young University and through the ROTC detachment there. He's got a lot of flying experience in one airplane that you don't hear very much about. We're going to talk to my good buddy, Bill Nelson, who flew C-23 Sherpas in Europe, 141s, C-17s, and he has certification in just about every Boeing airliner, but I think 707s. So grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin episode 97 of the Lessons from the Cockpit show with my very good friend, Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson, my old college buddy. Welcome to the Lessons from the Cockpit show, brother. Thanks for being on with me today.
Thank you, Mark.
You and I go back a few minutes, huh?
Yeah, just a few minutes. Was it 40, 43, 44 years?
Yeah.
Something like that? Yeah.
Yeah. We were ROTC buddies.
That's right.
And BYU.
Yep.
The good years when Jim McMahon was quarterbacking, Steve Young was the backup, Danny Ainge was playing basketball.
That's right. Wally Joyner was playing baseball.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's right. Wally Joyner was playing baseball.
Yep.
Wally's dad was our stake president in Atlanta when I was living in Atlanta.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wally and I knew each other as young deacons. It's pretty funny.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So first thing I always ask my guests, man, how in the world did you become interested in a career in aviation?
I was lucky. My father was a Navy fighter pilot, actually a TAC pilot, several tours of duty in Vietnam. He had a really good career. He's a Top Gun instructor. He was a test pilot. He was an admiral's aide, squadron commander. He was actually up for admiral, and he was going to get a carrier. And for him, the family was number one.
Yeah.
And mom didn't want to move anymore, and so he, after he commanded his squadron, he gave it up. And then
Wow.
I saw what he was like. The realities of war. Everybody I knew went to war. My best friend's father was killed over there. Alvarez. Those people were my neighbors. I prisoner of war, Commander Ted Kaufman. I swam with his kids. He had a 9-year-old daughter he never knew. So these are my neighbors. I lived on
Yeah.
base. So that was my life. And so I originally I wanted to be a flight surgeon. So I went to college I wanted to graduate from BYU, go to medical school, be a cardiac pediatrician. And I didn't want to work that hard. And so I thought, you know what? Everybody I knew was a carrier pilot, so it can't be that hard. So I signed up and underestimated the difficulty of becoming a military pilot at the time. And everybody I knew flew and graduated from pilot training, and career started from there.
Oh, I didn't know your dad was a test pilot.
Yeah, he was called NAS Glencoe, and it was more like an advanced FCF pilot.
Yeah.
And at that time, he would, like, the way he learned to fly F4s is a buddy of his flew an F4 over to NAS Lemoore, and Dad said, "Hey, can I fly it?" And he goes, "Sure." So the guy walked away, and Dad asked him, "Well, you're going to teach me?" And he goes, "Okay, you know how you're a pilot. Yeah, here's the NATOPS manual. Go have a good time." That's how he learned to fly F-86s, Sabre jets. He just sat in there, read the book, looked at the controls, and took off.
Wow.
Very different Navy at the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very different. Your dad was a West Coast guy. You said Lemoore, right?
Yeah, but the test pilot place was on the East Coast from Brunswick, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And this is like kind of a reward for him after his first 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. And I remember this is when they wore the orange flight suits. And I was 8 years old, and he said, "Hey, Gene," to my mother, "bring him down to the flight line and he can watch me fly." And Mom was like, "Okay, dear." So she brings him down there. And he was a little guy. He's like 5'8", 140 pounds. Um, and granted, I might be biased. He was a very, very good pilot.
Yeah.
And so he took off in an F8 and flew over the field, turned back around, came over the field at about Mach, went up in the air, spiraled up, flipped upside down, came back around upside down. And I mean, as a kid, this is wow, this is amazing. And Mom looks at me
Yeah.
and she goes, "Your father's such a show off."
That's funny. Orange bag.
Yep.
I heard something a long time ago. I said the one thing we've learned from Star Wars is there'll always be pilots and they'll always wear orange bags.
Well, when he was in Vietnam, he brought one of his old orange flight suits to a tailor in Hong Kong. And I had a little orange flight suit made for me when I was 6 years old.
Really?
I wish I still had that.
Oh
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
It was
I
a very different world back then.
oh yeah. Very different. I had I had an orange flight suit at one time too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah, a guy in the Coast Guard gave it to me when I was on my mission in Alaska,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, I used it for pajamas. I mean, all kinds of crazy things. He was a really big guy. I know I'm a big guy, but I mean, he was much bigger than I was. And
Well, yeah, I'm fortunate to have all of his gear from Vietnam except for his helmet. My nephew has his helmet, but I've got his G suit, I've got his harness, I've got his flight suit, all that stuff.
oh, that's interesting. That's
I've
some
got
really
his.
cool memorabilia. That's some
It
really
is.
cool memorabilia.
I've got all that stored downstairs with my old. A lot of my stuff burned up in a barn fire, but the stuff I still have, we kind of have it stored downstairs. And I have his leather jacket from Vietnam with my leather jacket, and then my son's jacket from Iraq and Afghanistan. So we're going to put all that together and make a display one of these days.
Oh, that's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool. So what did you study at BYU? Were you in biology or medicine or
I
what
was
did you
zoology pre-med.
okay.
The dumb thing is after I got my pilot training slot, I thought, well, I don't have to keep, busting my butt in zoology. And so I thought, no, I want to be manly and doggone it, prove I can make it through. Well, I almost flunked the class the last
Yeah.
day. And so I went to the professor and I said, "Hey, if you pass me in this class, I'm going to pilot training. I'll never go to medical school." And he goes, "You promise you never go to medical school?" I said, "I promise I'll never go." And he goes, "Okay, you pass."
Yeah. I had to do the same thing in my political science too.
Yep.
I I was going to get a D, and I said, look,
Yep.
I'm not going into political science. Okay. All I'm doing is this is just a way to get me into the cockpit.
Yep.
He goes, well, that's a really poor attitude, and I said, understand. All right. But, I'm doing 14 credits and everything because I changed my major
Yeah.
when I got to BYU and stacked everything up, so I'm your like average C student and,
Yeah.
and got through, but, little did I realize that I'd use that political science stuff later on in my career, working at the, air operations centers, writing white papers for the
Yes.
State Department,
Yeah.
So where'd you go to pilot training?
Reese Air Force Base
In Texas?
in Texas. That's right. It was I was the only one in the class that got assigned to Reese. And remember Michael Fry?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mike Fry.
Yeah, got it. He got F-15, so he was pretty famous. But the three Mormons after me that went there all washed out or quit.
Oh
And so I show up, and the week I show up, I go to church. A Mormon guy had just SIE'd.
yeah.
And I remember one of the guys in the class said, "You're going to Reese," and kind of shook my hand and said, "Good luck." And yeah, it was, I was not at that time a gifted pilot.
Yeah.
I made it through. But I
Yeah.
remember walking down, I mean, you remember that was at a time they didn't care if you made it through or not.
No.
They didn't need pilots. I mean, my academic average was 93, and I graduated the bottom third of my class. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
it was like.
Yeah.
And I was walking down the hallway one time, and an instructor comes by and goes, Lieutenant Nelson, you're still here? Oh, thanks, buddy. So,
Yeah.
but
My introduction to T-37s, okay, and I'm not going to say his name, okay, I can still remember him. He had a real chip on his shoulder because
yeah.
he had his dream assignment, 141 in Norton, and the guy above him busted, and so they swapped him to a FAPE, okay, and he was mad and
Oh,
pissed off. And I sat down. He's playing table football with some guy. He doesn't even look at me, He just says, "I've got my wings. You don't have yours. You got to prove to me you want them. And if you can't prove to me, then I'm just going to wash you out. You're not going to be here very long." And Doug and I, my table mate, we looked at each other like, okay, well, how long are we going to be here? And sure enough, we went to 88 rides because, as you know, the mid phase check, you're just thrown to the wolves.
oh yeah.
You're just thrown to the wolves. Okay. And so my mid phase was an 88 ride, and
My
which I
mid my,
passed and did really well.
my mid phase was an 89 ride.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, uh, I went to another 88 ride, and this major who was the OPSO said, "Hey, tell me about your instructor." And I said, "Well, obviously we're not learning anything. Doug's in the same boat I am. He's had 288s too." And sure enough, they took him off the line. Finally.
That's interesting because my 88, I didn't do that great. My 89, I came back and I blew through the radio coming into the airfield. And I went, oh crap. So I racked it back around 90 degrees of bank, pulled 4 Gs getting back on the radio. And when we landed, it was a major. He was chief of Stanival. I thought, I'm toast.
Yeah.
I'll become a farm fertilizer salesman or something.
Yeah.
So I sit down and he goes, "Why are you here?" But oh crap, he's wondering, why am I a pilot training? So, well, sir, and he goes, "Why are you on an 89 ride? If that would have been a mid-phase check, you would have got an excellent." And I said, "Well, sir, if people aren't screaming at me, grabbing my oxygen hose and smacking my helmet, I do okay."
Yeah.
And he said, "Okay, we'll fix it."
Yeah. Yeah. And sure enough, like I said, they took this guy off the line. The two guys that they gave to him all had come with like 3,000 hours. I mean, one guy, Bryce, Bryce was literally born in an airplane in Australia. All
Oh
right.
wow.
And he's one of those guys that had 3,000 hours when he showed up. All he wanted was a C-130. Says, "I just want a C-130." Okay. And he flew a ride with my instructor. He busted. The only ride he busted through an entire pilot training was because on a formation ride, because he didn't like the way he did a cross under. Busted him on cross unders. And
As much as I disliked it, and I remember his name, but as much as I disliked him, one thing, and this is one of the powerful lessons it taught me, I vowed as an instructor I was never going to be a
yeah,
jerk to the people I worked with.
yeah. And see, I got a great instructor after that. I watched back a class, got a great instructor. As a matter of fact, I just talked to him about 4 months ago. We hadn't talked
Oh,
to
did
each
you?
other. Yeah, we hadn't talked to each other, like I said, 44, 43 years. And he reached out to me because of the book and said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me." I go, "Oh yeah." And we had a great time flying together. You
You know,
know,
it sounds like our stories are similar because after that, I never busted another ride.
I did when I got in T-38s because I couldn't do a fix to fix.
Well, wait a minute.
I couldn't do a fix
Uh,
to fix.
in formation, I struggled a little bit in formation, but yeah, after that, I mean, fix to fix back then, you had to nail it.
I know.
I mean, all you do in the civilian world is find the radial and fly up or down the radial. That's it.
Yeah, I know that. And it's completely different than when you and I were flying back then.
The old pencil method. Remember the popsicle
Oh
stand?
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The rule of fives, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff
Oh
and
yeah.
everything. And I just couldn't get it until I had to have an 88 ride in T-38s, and I shacked it twice. I like rolled out like a quarter mile from each one. And I was
You
at
know.
Vance, so we went to Oklahoma City, which is only 20 minutes away.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right, went into holding, did everything fine, did an approach down there. I was actually with the squadron commander, T-38 squadron commander,
Uh-huh.
and then had me do another one back at Vance. Again, only 20 minutes away. I'm going like crazy.
You're busy.
I was really busy, okay, and I got a quarter mile for both of them, and of course he sits down and goes, you fly a really good airplane, okay, but you've just been beat up when you're in T-37s. That's your problem.
You know,
And
it's interesting because when I did my T-38 check ride in formation, I
mhm.
got beat up because I said I was kind of a wuss when I was rejoining. And I thought, well, doggone it, this time I'm not going to be. So we're doing a turning rejoin, and I'm screaming. I'm probably
Yeah,
overtaking by 60 knots.
yeah.
And so I'm racking it up and I'm popping speed brakes. And oh, doggone it. And I thought, I don't want to cross under because that's being a wuss. And so I'm in almost 60 degrees of bank and I'm hyperventilating. He can't hear me.
Yeah.
So I slide underneath him like this and I just nail it. So we come back in and land and he goes, boy, Lieutenant Nelson, that's one of the best turning rejoins I've ever seen. And I'm thinking, dude, you know how close I came to killing this, but
Yeah,
I'll take it.
yeah, yeah. Let me tell you what's going on in my mind. But there are, I still remember T-38 formation. That was probably some of the funnest flying you and I ever
That
did.
was a blast. That
Some
was.
of the funnest flying you and I ever did was T-38 formation, man.
Yeah,
And
when you're doing it solo, yeah.
oh, oh my gosh. Yeah. When you're doing it solo, I got a one downgrade good on my form check, because I was being a wuss in fingertip, he says, "Man, you were right there pulling G's and everything. You're right there." And then all of a sudden we'd relax and you like fall out a little bit. He says, what were you thinking, and everything. Anyway, but yeah, T-38. I mean, the T-38 program was built around formation. Yeah, you had to do the navigation thing and everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, I look back at that, Bill, and I think about the instruments you and I were taught how to fly
Oh
with
my gosh.
concerned what we're flying now compared to what we're flying now. And it's
NDBs.
night and day different.
Oh yeah.
Night and day different.
You know, I think one of the other stories I remember from pilot training is as most time I did okay, but there was times I struggled. And I think it was 4 days to graduation. I did my final check,
Mhm.
and I remember I had never done a SID. And so we took off and they cleared me 18,000 feet. So I blew through the top of the SID to 18,000. I felt somebody push over and back. And I said, what? And he goes, it's okay, take the airplane. So I took it and came back. So this guy was an F-15 pilot.
Yeah,
His Captain Anderson, great
yeah,
guy. So
yeah.
I'm sitting with him, sitting up straight and stiff at the debrief, and he hides all the grades. And he goes, "Well, Lieutenant Nelson, why'd you blow through the altitude?" And I said, "What altitude?" Because I went on the top of the SID. I said, "Well, ATC cleared me 18,000." He goes, "Have you ever done a SID before?" I went, "No." He goes, "Okay." Then he put a good on it, and then a couple other things. And he said, "Well, on your EP, uh, it was something like I lost my nav instruments." I said, "What'd you do?" "Okay, I know Reese is this direction. I know where the sun is. I'm going to do a time descent." He goes, "Oh, okay, that's pretty smart." So he gave me a good on that, and I got
Yeah,
6 goods. And there's like 40 some odd things you got graded on.
yeah,
I thought,
yeah,
oh crap. I busted everything else. So I'm sitting straight like this. And he says, Lieutenant Nelson, it wasn't a great ride, but it was a good ride. And I said, yes, sir. He goes, Nelson, it was a good ride. I said, yes, sir. He goes, Lieutenant Nelson, you passed. And I said, you mean I'm an Air Force pilot?
Yeah.
And he goes, yes. And I literally did this. I was like, oh, thank God. He just busted up laughing.
Yeah. And at Vance, you picked your profile out of an ashtray with golf tees.
Oh,
And
wow.
the golden golf tee was you get to pick your profile. Okay. Guess who got the gold golf tee?
Did you get the gold golf tee?
I got the gold golf tee. I said, we're going to do an en route descent to Offutt. Okay. Okay. Cause it was not very far away at all from Vance and everything, you know? And so I was flying with Chris Lemon, Captain Chris Lemon. Okay. Beard clear, toys to the rear, Chris Lemon. Okay. And en route descent, all the approaches, everything went fine. He had one question for me on the EP, you know, okay, you know, why did you pick doing a localizer instead of an ILS? I said, well, you know, you told me that the mins were this, you know, when I asked you and everything like that. And I said, flying the localizer, come down below the clouds, like gives me more time to look for the runway and everything like that. And he goes, yeah, okay, that's pretty smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty smart. Okay. All right. You got a 2 downgrade. Good. Guess what? You're an Air Force pilot. That's what he said to me. He goes, guess what? You're an Air Force pilot now. Okay. And got back into the flight room and everything. And I finished 2 weeks early.
Oh, wow.
And so 2 weeks, about a week and a half. Okay. And of course, you have to keep your landing currency every week, you know?
Yes.
So I got to go out just by myself, you
Yeah.
know, and my IP was a scheduler. He says, you know, don't do anything stupid. Okay. You know?
Yes.
But you know what? That ride was completely different because I know I'm going to get my wings. And literally, I flew that ride different. I wasn't being graded. I wasn't being, you know, nobody's talking back to me or anything like that. Greased the landings, did all kinds of great stuff after that, you know, and got my wings the next week, man. And like
You
within
know,
two
that's
weeks.
interesting. That's exactly what happened to me.
Really?
I had to get 45 minutes in. And so I graduated, I was done. So the next
Yeah.
day I hopped in a T-38, go out to the area, you know, strafe cars, shoot things down, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I landed at 47 minutes,
Yeah.
pulled a Coke out of my G suit pocket, threw it to the crew chief and said, congratulations, I'm done.
Yeah. I, I went out to the area, you know, we call it the tubes because you had to move, you know, like section to section.
Yeah.
You know, you can only spend so much time in it, you know, and I was just out there doing figure eight, you know, clover leaf, you know, figure eight,
Yeah.
I just loops and everything, you know. And I remember just screaming to myself, you know, this is going to be great, you know.
Yep.
And, you know, I got to fly the airplane that I'd wanted to fly ever since I was a kid. I'd wanted to fly 707s. My class got 21 KC-135 assignments.
Good
21.
grief.
Yeah.
What was your class?
8505. Okay.
Okay.
So we got 21 tanker assignments. All right. One of them was an EC-135.
Okay.
And then we had like a C-130, two C-141s, and an F-16. Okay. And that was
That's it?
for my section. Yeah, for our class.
Good grief.
Literally, we all went off to tankers. It was crazy. All right. And I'd wanted to fly a 707 ever since I was a kid and loved every minute of it. And I literally put P's down because it was on the East Coast near a beach. I had no idea where it was. They just said, "Oh yeah, it's on the East Coast near a beach near Boston." I said, "You have to put an East Coast one," because I had like Beale, Castle, because I was
Oh,
from
yeah.
California, you know. All
Yeah.
right, March, you know, Riverside, all those kinds of things. They said, "No, you got to put one on the East Coast." Okay. And I went, okay. Where's one near a beach? Oh, Pease Air Force Base, right on the beach above Boston. That's good. That's where I ended up going. Okay. I hate lobster. I don't eat lobster. Okay. My wife does, you know,
Well,
and
that's where you met your wife, right?
I did. I met her at Boston, and this is what I tell everybody. I met my wife at a party I didn't want to go to. I stood her up on our first date, and our courtship involved nuclear weapons, you know. But you end up in a very unique airplane coming out of pilot training. All right. Was that even on your dream sheet? It was even
Uh,
on your
they
list?
they had just come out, and
Ah,
when I put in my original dream sheet, I wanted KC 135s, and my instructor goes, "You don't want," and I go, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "No, you don't." Okay, and so I looked at it and I thought, I have no idea what a C-23 is, but it's in Germany and it looks cool. So I was the first guy to get C-23s. I mean, when we showed up, there were no simulators. We had the wooden Indians, that was it. We looked at that. We had no, we would, and the building we had was an old bomb shelter at an old NATO base. There was no official instruction. When I got there, we had 3 C-23s, that was it. And I was fortunate in that a buddy of mine and I were the first two homegrown instructors. We were first lieutenant instructors flying in Germany.
ooh,
Can you imagine that? But they told us, it was kind of sobering. This is back in the 80s during the height of the Cold War. We brought our chem gear with us home. I had to have an evacuation plan for my family. And I go in there smiling one day, having a great time. He goes, "Well, Lieutenant Nelson, you know what your survival rate's going to be if the balloon goes up?" No, he goes, "About 10 minutes." I went, "Well, okay, well, at least I'll die fast."
yeah, yeah.
Um, but great flying, absolutely amazing flying.
Yeah, and the C-23 Sherpa, people like look at me when I say, "Oh, I've got a good friend of mine, Bill Nelson, who flew Sherpas," and they look at me like, "What kind of airplane?"
It was the whole reason it existed was in case the balloon went up, we would fly parts low level to different NATO bases. We could carry an F-100 engine. And so we would sit alert, and if someone needed a part, boom, we were in the plane within an hour taking that part where they needed it. So we developed what was known as EDS, which is the European Distribution System, based in England, where all the parts were. We
Yeah.
could fly there, pick up the part, and low level it to any base in NATO. So if something went down, we could get you a part within 5 to 6 hours, and in case of a war, that was our job. We were going to fly parts to people who needed it really fast
At low level.
at low level.
Wow. That I did not know.
We It was interesting. You could go up in the F-15s or the F-16s and try and shoot you down.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
we had one guy, and they said, "Are you guys busy?" "No." "Okay, why don't you try and shoot us down?" So what he did is he went along the Autobahn, matched the speed of a Porsche, and the Porsche couldn't find him. And the F-15 couldn't find him because he got ground clutter from everything else. You could put the flaps out and slow it down to about 80 knots, and the Doppler would never pick you up.
Man, I didn't think of that.
And
Wow.
our IR signature was really, really low.
Yeah. Describe the airplane real quick so everybody knows what you're talking about. I know what it looks like, but just kind of describe the airplane, and um
It was it was kind of a derivative of flying boxcar kind of thing. And the civilians had it in a single tail version known as a Short Brothers 360. We were a Short Brothers 330. You had an open cargo hold in back. You had two pilots. You had a load master type engineer. You could carry a bunch of passengers in back. You had two PT6A 45Rs, 1200 shaft horsepower, free spool engines, Hartzell props. Max weight was 23,000 pounds. Endurance was about 7 hours. So you zipped along at 10,000 feet at 160 knots.
wow. And I'm sure you had all kinds of crazy things that you took all over Europe in the back of that airplane.
One time we took a ton of potato chips.
What?
Yes.
A ton of potato chips?
Yeah. Then another time during Christmas, we bought I think it was 1,000 pounds of candied orange slices
Where were you taking the potato chips?
to Italy because the BXs in Italy were out of potato chips. So we brought potato chips.
That's hilarious, man.
And I think one time we bought $1 million in quarters to the slot machines.
The slot machines, where?
In Europe, you had
In
slot
your
machines in the bases. You couldn't
Oh, at
have
the
them
bases.
stateside.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. So we would bring called jingle pallets. Remember those?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we would have hundreds of thousands of dollars in quarters in the back of the airplane, and we'd buzz it around. It was, I was a second lieutenant. I'm a 25-year-old kid that back in the 80s, they give me an airplane, and I remember we had to burn gas at the end of the year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they say, I was the first lieutenant, Bill, go find yourself a co-pilot. So I had to call a buddy of mine, what are you doing tomorrow? Nothing. I said, okay, so Gary, you want to go with me around Europe? Sure. So we'd hop in a plane, okay, burn 7 hours of fuel. So we go to Bitburg for lunch, we go to Milton Hall for dinner, do some grocery shopping, put in the back of the plane, come back and land.
Oh my gosh. And see,
Can't do anything.
that was back in the day when nobody even asked a question about that kind
No,
of stuff.
no, no. Of
You
course,
know?
you can't do that now.
Oh,
But
no, 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 no. They'd put you in
y-
jail.
oh yeah, but
They'd put you in jail.
we were. It was a brand new squadron developing brand new tactics. Um, it was just the tactics we developed, like short. We could stop in 300 feet. We could bring that thing to a screaming
Wow.
halt. We could take off in 800 feet. It was a great STOL airplane. It really was.
And when you look at the thing, you see how boxy it is and everything. You don't
Mhm.
think that. Okay. Was it overpowered?
No,
It wasn't.
single engine. It was a struggle on a hot day, but the body itself was a lifting surface. So it had
Oh yeah,
really,
because it's
really
so
long,
flat.
right. It had
Yeah.
long, thin wings. The only problem it had is it was an ice magnet.
Really?
So when we get into icing, you had to be careful. I was trying to climb out of icing once and expose that bottom to ice, and yeah, it was a struggle.
Ooh.
I got
Yeah.
got
Icing in Europe. Imagine that everywhere
oh
you
yeah.
go. Yeah. So where
And
were
then
you based out of? Where were you flying out of?
it's called Zweibrücken. It was an RF4 base.
Oh yeah,
We were a
Zweibrücken.
guest unit.
Yeah, Zweibrücken. Boy, that's a beautiful area of Germany, isn't it?
It was. We
Bitburg,
enjoyed it.
Spangdahlem, everything all down there.
I really enjoyed my time there. Matter of fact, Perry was flying F-16s at Hahn.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
He was
Pee-wee
our
was on.
stake high councilman.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah, he showed up at our board once. Perry Winder. So yeah, he was our stake high councilman.
Perry, for all my listeners, is another uh, great American who we went to school with. He and I grew up together. He and I
Yeah,
had known each other since we were 9 years old.
remember when he graduated? We did that. Took that Air Force poster and put his picture on it. Made an Air Force poster out of him.
Yep, yep, we
Yeah,
sure did. Sure did. His dad was the bishop of our Sandy Springs, Georgia ward. My dad was his first
was he?
counselor. Yeah, yeah. We'd get on our 10-speed bikes and go to each other's house and build model planes and all kinds of crazy things, man, when we
Yeah,
were
he's a
kids.
Perry's a good guy.
He really is. He
Good
really
guy.
is.
Yeah, for a second lieutenant first assignment, that was a great assignment.
Yeah. So how long were you there?
3 years.
3 years?
Exactly. You could not extend.
Oh, interesting.
I was offered to be a Czech airman, and if I upgraded to Czech airman, I could extend for 6 months. And we decided as a family that wouldn't be in our best interest. So you had to be out by 3 years.
Okay. Uh, so how did you end up in 141s?
141s is what I always wanted.
Yeah.
And if you did C-23s, you could pretty much get as an airlifter what you wanted.
Okay.
And so I didn't really want C5s, really wanted a 141, so I got what I wanted. Went to Norton because that's where my in-laws at the time lived, was near there.
Yeah.
Loved heavy airlift, went there, did that tour for 3 years, then I became an instructor at the schoolhouse, did that for 3 years, and then went to a staff tour that loved living there, didn't like the staff tour, but did the staff tour for 3 years, went back to 141s for 3 years,
Uh-huh.
then got out and was initial cadre in the reserves for C-17s.
Oh. What'd you do on your staff tour?
First, I was chief of safety for the C-141 fleet,
Okay.
and then I worked up at plans and programs. I was in charge of BRAC plans and programs for about 12 different bases. It was classified at the time, it's not anymore. I also wrote the rebasing module for the ICBMs out of some of the northern tier bases.
Ooh, Geez.
And then when the Sync Mac would visit different bases,
Yeah.
I was the one that wrote his and put together his booklets. And I did it once and hated it because it took up so much time. And I did such a good job, they made me do it from then on. But a good story there. Amazing how much power, if you know your stuff, how
Yeah.
much power you can wield. Remember the time when 141s kept flaming out engines?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I do.
we got called in on a Sunday on that. So me and a buddy of mine, he was chief of stand and valve for 141s. We're sitting in back, little Captain Nelson and Captain Stoddard, Okay,
Yeah.
we're here. So the generals and colonels all up front. Now, what are we going to do? And one guy came up and said, look, we know it's clogging up the fuel metering units. So we know they don't flame out till 2,000 pounds per hour. So what we'll do is we'll have them fly in. And as they flare, keep it up at 2,000 pounds per hour, then rip it to idle. And if it flames out, they'll just land on the runway. And I'm sitting in back and they look at me and say, well, Captain Nelson, what do you think? And I said, I can't do that. I can't ask some pilot to hope the plane doesn't flame out when he's trying to land. I said, sir, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So Jim Stoddard next to me, they go, what does stand about thing? He goes, sir, we can't do that. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, and this is a colonel asking
Yeah.
a little captain. He said,
Yeah.
okay, safety wise, you have to ground the fleet till you fix it. He goes, what? And I said, you have to ground the fleet. You have people flaming engines out. So he didn't tell the 4-star. So that
Oh.
night, they grounded 60% of his airlift. 241 C-141s were instantly grounded on the advice of two
Oh.
captains, but didn't tell SyncMac. So he wakes up on a Monday with 60% of his airlift grounded. He was not a happy man.
No, I'll bet he wasn't. Did they ever find out what was causing it?
Yeah, what they had done is, the weep holes that are between the spars. Well,
Yeah.
what they had done when they drilled the weep holes, you have to drill straight. And I learned this when I did the safety school. If you pulled it out, you nick the side of it, and it increases stress lines by 9 times. So what was happening is they were getting cracks on those weep holes. So what they would do, they put a boron patch over the weep hole, then they would sand the boron patch down with those regular Scotch-Brite scrubbers, the ones you use to scrub your pots and pans. Well, that's going to leave aluminum oxide they didn't bother to clean out. So the aluminum oxide would get into the fuel, and the fuel metering units had a needle valve that was quite small, maybe this big,
Yeah.
that would meter parts of the fuel that would control fuel all the way through, and it was getting into the needles and clogging them. And so your fuel flow behind it to push through the needle, then the fuel pressure would get small enough. You just couldn't push through the needle, it would flame the engines out.
Oh, jeez.
And so I got to go to the base. I got to go to Warner Robins and examine that. And then the C-21 that crashed when it had the fuel imbalance, I got to be part of that team that did that.
Yeah.
There were there were other things that happened. I don't know if they're classified anymore. I don't want to put it at risk, so I'm not going to say anything. But
Yeah.
I remember one time I was BRAC for March Air Force Base. March had just bought a $350,000 really, really nice fire engine right before they BRAC'd it. And when you BRAC a base, that goes to if the Air Force doesn't grab it, it goes to the civilian community. Well, the Air Force thought it would be smart to put that fire engine in a parade. And so everybody in Riverside sees that fire engine. Now, the congresswoman who I got to meet sees that fire engine and goes, oh, and starts drooling over it because it's a nice fire engine. And so when they bracket, what the Air Force did is at night, they snuck the fire engine out of March and hightailed it to Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Oh, no.
So I get a call the next day from the congressperson saying, Major Nelson, where's my fire engine? Ma'am, I have no idea. And so I get hold of the wing commander, who's a friend of mine, and I said, Colonel? Yeah, Bill. He goes, I got to find out where the fire engine is. He goes, well, that's at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I said, we can't do that. I said, well, that's a $350,000 fire engine, Bill. I said, sir, I got Congress on my back. You got to bring it back. And then I went to higher heads, and they finally brought it back.
Oh my gosh. And Riverside got its brand new fire engine, huh?
Yeah. You remember Foot Ingersoll? Did you remember that name?
Vaguely.
He was the wing commander at Travis, ended up being a 1-star, then ended up working for Boeing. And I was bragging Travis, and he came to me and he says, "Hey, Bill, I'd like to know, can you get some C-12s here?" And I went, "Sir?" He goes, "I'd like to have a C-12 unit." I said, "Sir, I don't have that kind of authority." He goes, "Well, you're in charge of the base, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." He says, "You're in charge of the units?" "Yeah." "You're in headquarters AMC?" And I went, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, I want you to bring a C-12 unit here." "Yes, sir." Saluted smartly and turned around
Yeah.
and thought,
Yeah. And then go find all the reasons why not to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Why
and
that's
I
a bad
think
idea.
I think the best story was I got to brief the 4-star on all the bracks. And so and I hadn't gotten some updated information from a colonel who was in charge of logistics for AMC, who was a good friend of mine. And he says, "Bill, what?" 4-star says, "Bill, where's this?" I said, "Sir, this is where it is." He goes, "Why isn't it done?" I said, "Sir, I don't know. I'll find out for you." "Well, who gave you the information?" And I said, "Sir, that crap." So I said, "Sir, it was Colonel here." And he looks at me and I thought, okay, I'm toast. My career's
Yeah.
over. I'm just gonna go slit my wrist now. And I
Yeah.
walk outside and the colonel goes, "Bill?" And I went, "Oh, geez." And I go, "Yes, sir." And he says, uh, "You know what? I'm really sorry about giving you bad data." And I almost started crying, like, "What? You're not gonna blame me?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "That was my fault 100%." And I tell you, my respect for that guy just shot through the roof.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know that. And you know what? We had too many people that tried to scapegoat all the time.
This guy did not. This guy really, really respected. I
I
mean,
I did 3 years at the AMC headquarters. Two
you
years in the
were
T
you
I
were
was a
at
West
the
Cell duty officer
yeah,
in
TACC. That's
the
right.
TACC. Yeah. I was a West Cell duty officer in the TACC, and the West Cell was never as busy as the East Cell because of all the stuff going on in the Middle East and Kosovo and all those kind of things. And there were times where, we'd come in, okay, well, what kind of pizza are we going to order tonight? You
Yeah.
know, but then there were times too where, it got really busy really fast, and I loved it because I had done tankers and I was really good at air refueling, but I had no idea how airlift worked. No idea. All right. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't care until I became a West Cell duty officer. Okay. And then moving cargo, how many pallets can you take, frustrated cargo. Um, and the reason they put me in the West Cell, obviously, was because I came there from Kadena. So
Yeah.
I had all the expertise of the uh, being out, in that area. And that helped me a lot. All right. And then my last year was up on the DO staff as the AMC tanker tactician, but I did I didn't do a whole lot of tactic stuff. I stood up the KC-135 weapons school. That's
I
really what
remember
my
I
job was.
remember us talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that I really stood, standing up and getting it going and everything like that. So, but I'm telling you, working in that air operations center, I really learned air mobility fast. You know, 141s, the C-17s were just coming online,
Yes.
and C-5s broken all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
but
I took the Army Command and General Staff College course by correspondence, and my son's an Army officer, so I was able to
yeah,
gain an appreciation for how the Army does things.
oh yeah, absolutely. So, hey, a couple things about 141 missions.
Mhm.
You guys do a lot. You guys probably did a lot of presidential support missions.
Yes, I did.
Did you? Talk to us about the Phoenix Banner missions, and I'm sure you've got some great stories from this because every time I was involved with the presidential support and presidential move, something weird happened.
Okay, I'll out myself. I'll go ahead and
Okay.
do that. We were carrying Vice President Bush at the time, and
Mhm.
I forget where we carried him into. And so we pull in, and it's a civilian marshaller who had never marshaled in a C-141 before. And this is the time when people kept scraping wingtips on things. And
Oh,
so
oh no.
my co-pilot didn't look out the right side, and he marshaled my wingtip into a tree and punched a hole in the fiberglass tip
Oh no.
of the wing. And then, so I hear over the radio, oh crap. And I see this branch of a tree on the ground. And so I shut the engine down. I go outside, a news crews are there. So I'm on the news that night looking at my wingtip going, oh crap. Shit. And I thought, wow, now I'm famous. And so when I got back, they flew us back.
Yeah.
I got called in to all the heavy breathers and maintenance one, and the colonel wanted to fry us. And then to this day, we're not going to reveal the guy's name, but a colonel's a friend of mine sat down. He goes, "You put him in a situation that it was no win.
Yeah.
You put him in an airfield we didn't adequately look at. You put him with a marshal who didn't know what he was doing. I mean, the guy's he's an instructor pilot with all these years of experience, and I guess he kind of pulled my butt out of the fire.
Yeah.
So I was forever grateful for that.
Man. So I'm sure flying 141s, man, you went into some really strange places. And I think the other day you and I talked on the phone about flying through the Middle East and what was it, staging out of Cairo West or something like that?
Yeah, we were staging out of Cairo West, and we had to check our boots and blankets when we got up in the morning to make sure there weren't scorpions in them. And
Oh,
the
no.
loadmaster gets up when he hear him yelling and stomping around after he shook a scorpion out of his boots. And then I did support missions at McMurdo Station, where we got down,
Oh,
we landed on glaciers and stuff. So
ice
that was a
missions.
good mission. Ice
Yeah,
missions were
talk
great.
about that. That's a really fascinating. So you're a ice pilot. You were cleared to fly to McMurdo, huh?
Yeah, I was the DO of the operation at the time. Um, we had just taken it over at McCord. And the mission at that time was considered the most hazardous peacetime mission we had, because you had something called a PSR, which is a point of safe return. Once you got past that point, because we couldn't get any tankers out there, you had to land at McMurdo. If you didn't land at McMurdo, there was literally no place to land. And so
Oh,
we
jeez.
were updating constantly. So about maybe about a third of the missions couldn't make it because prior to PSR, the weather would go down and you couldn't risk it. So you had to turn around and head back. Then when you would land on the ice, you would have to be there. You'd have to unload in about an hour or the plane would sink into the ice.
Oh, I did not know that.
And so what would happen is we would have the back of the airplane loaded with probably 10 tons of fresh fruits and vegetables. And the weather would go down and we'd be down for 3 or 4 days, and all those fresh fruits and vegetables had to be tossed and new ones bought. So you went through that quite a bit.
What was your point of origin when you went on these missions? Where did you start from?
Christchurch.
Christchurch, New Zealand? Okay.
They had those 130s there from Schenectady that had the skis.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
guys have skis or were you guys just rubber tires?
We were rubber tires. The only difference was we had to use a special kind of fuel that wouldn't gel, because you know how JP4 is paraffin based.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
stuff could still flow on below zero temperatures.
Oh, jeez. But
So you'd
see,
be taxing. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you
I was
saying?
going to say, you know, talk about what it's like being down there when you finally land. That's got to be crazy. All the stuff you got to think about.
It's kind of surreal, because you're flying along over the ocean and all of a sudden this land comes out of the mist, and it's hard to realize you're really there. Like Mount Erebus, that's the
Yeah.
one that that civilian plane crashed in 2 years before.
Yeah.
You can see where the plane crashed.
Yeah.
There's the wreckage of an old Lockheed that got hung up in the ice. Where the original explorers, and I think it was Scott, had a cabin there, and a seal crawled up to that cabin like 90 years previously and died. Well,
Uh-huh.
its carcass is still perfectly preserved there.
Oh, jeez.
And so as soon as you landed there, you got swarmed. They'd get fuel in you, offload things, but you had to be really careful how you moved and how things worked, because if it gets so cold, it would snap. But it was really kind of an unreal thing being there.
Now, obviously, you guys had to be dressed for this kind of place too. Okay. I mean, you guys were probably flying in big parkas and everything. Is that correct?
Well, of course, the plane's got environmentals in it, but as soon as we shut
Yeah.
down, let's see, I wore, my regular stuff. Then I had thermals, my flight suit, a just like a jacket underneath, and my one I bought myself, then a full parka.
Yeah.
Then I had glove liners, full gloves, and then one of those frost masks you would
Oh,
wear, and I wore goggles over that.
uh-huh.
So you kind of waddled out of the plane afterwards,
Oh, geez.
and you had to have we took an augmented crew, but there had to be two pilots on the plane all the time because you had to leave right then.
Yeah.
And we were told if weather goes down bad enough and we can't get the plane out, well, guess what? You're going to live there for the next few months.
Oh, months, not days, not hours,
Months,
months.
months. But it was, and I think the season was about 3 months. So you would first land on a glacier
Yeah.
until, no, you land on an ice floe
Yeah.
until that melted away. Then you would land on a glacier.
Oh,
So you'd be taxiing around, and an emperor penguin would pop up through the ice. So you'd have to stop your taxi and wait for the emperor penguin to waddle by. So
see, I've seen somebody did a painting of that. I think it was Keith Ferris,
yes,
where he's got these emperor penguins all around. I can't remember what airplane it is that's down there.
yeah,
Maybe it was a 141.
that's what it was
Yeah.
like.
I mean, that's got to be crazy. Okay. And obviously you can only go in there at certain times of the day. You're not going in there at night, are you?
No, we would leave really, really early in the morning. The safety they put around it was pretty impressive. That you had to go through a special school, and then your briefing probably took 2 hours to do. So everybody would get together. You'd have the crew brief, then the
Yeah.
loads would brief, then the pilots would brief, then you brief with the loads and the engineers, then you brief with the scientists. So, and there was and then the Army ran the ground portion of it.
Hmm.
So you brief with the Army guy who was there, and he
Yeah.
was permanent party. He lived there. So it was a pretty well-oiled machine when the Air Force, by the time they got a hold of it.
Oh, and I'm sure when you landed, man, everybody's scurrying around the airplane to get you guys turned around and out.
Yeah, they wanted us out of there quick. So
Yeah.
the farthest I wandered off was to go see that dead seal on the porch. And then the commander one time wandered off because he wanted to talk to somebody. And we had to call him and say, "Sir, you got to get back because we got to go."
Yeah. Because
So
the weather's deteriorating.
weather was deteriorating and you were sinking into the ice.
Oh, yeah.
So you had to move the plane every half hour, something like that, so it wouldn't sink into the ice. Because if you sunk into the ice, you were stuck. You weren't going to move.
Uh-huh. So you said you had to move it every half hour. So did they have a tow for you down there that would move the airplane, or you're there for 30 minutes and you're out?
You're there for 30 minutes and you're out. I don't remember if it was exactly 30 minutes, but you min timed it on the ground and you were gone because they would actually, by the time you landed and you stopped your taxi, you were being timed,
Yeah.
and you'd have people remind you constantly, "Hey, I got to go, I got to go."
Yeah.
And yeah, they pushed you pretty hard to get out of there.
Yeah. So Bill, your first flight down there, what were you thinking, man? I mean, the first time seeing Antarctica and landing on a place, I mean, it's just white. I'm sure there's probably edges painted on the ice or something, isn't there?
What
No?
they have this kind of, I don't remember if it's Kool-Aid or something, but they spray it on the ice to kind of give you an idea of what it's like. And then I had to be trained by a guy who'd been trained previously. Then I was made an instructor. And so everybody down there had to have a certain certification that you had to recertify. So we were turning the mission over to the reserves.
Yeah.
And so I instructed the commander for the reserves.
Yeah.
But first time over there, like I said, it was surreal. So you're going to the edge of the world from New Zealand. So you go to New Zealand where it's warm and balmy and sunny, to this
Yeah.
place that's minus 40 below. And then you see this white thing come out of the mist and this black ocean that's completely black. And it's honestly, and maybe this sounds corny, it helps you to believe there is a God.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
It's
Yeah.
it's an absolutely amazing place that, and I look at that and I think that, to me, this reaffirms my testimony that God exists.
Yeah. Absolutely. And talking a little bit more about this PSR subject that you mentioned too, that was obviously your turnaround point, and you were obviously watching the weather really, really closely, weren't you?
We had satellite communication to weather, and
Hmm.
then we always carried a navigator. And the navigator's part was we would be up updated every so many minutes, and we'd be getting constant satellite shots back to us. So we
Okay.
would talk to him, hey, how are we doing on PSR? Because he was calculating it and we would calculate it. And he would say, okay, 10 minutes to PSR, 5 minutes to PSR. Then he'd say, okay, sir, we're at PSR. And then as a crew, we'd have to make the decision, what are we going to do? Because we couldn't go into holding. We didn't have fuel for him. Okay, we're past PSR. We got to go, guys. So it's okay. We're 10 minutes to PSR. What's the crew decision? We're going. So we'd call back and we'd say, okay, we're at PSR. We're going to go. Okay, you're going to go. Good luck.
Okay. So how long are these flights, round trip?
Pretty much all day.
Really?
You'd leave early in the morning, you'd get back later that night.
So to fly from Christchurch to McMurdo, how long did that take?
I think it was 7 or 8 hours. I think so.
Wow, I didn't know that. Holy smokes.
But it was so long ago, I don't remember, but yeah, it was fairly lengthy. You had to get fuel down there. You couldn't carry enough fuel with you.
Yeah, there's no tankers.
I remember
down there.
that.
Yeah, obviously
So,
there's any tankers down there,
and then what would happen is with one of us, the flexible fuel joints in the wings froze and cracked. So when they were refueling us, a geyser shot up over the wing because it was leaking gallons and gallons of fuel.
No.
And so we had a whole maintenance team with parts with us. So this guy's out there, with frozen JP4 on a frozen wing.
Yeah.
These guys were amazing, getting in there, crawling through that wing and fixing it. That was impressive.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Before we sank into the ice.
Before you sank into the ice. Yeah. So would you leave there pretty much empty? I mean, obviously you're taking a lot of stuff down there. And would you bring anything back with you?
We bring back a lot of happy scientists because they get to come home after being in the ground for so many months.
Got it.
So we had a lot of really happy people.
Oh,
So,
I'll bet.
They were looking.
I had a mission that I was running once, and it was a medevac. They had to go medevac a guy, okay, because he developed heart trouble. All right, and is a medevac mission something that you guys would do? Because sometimes those just popped up. I was like, you got to go down there and pick up this guy now.
We had to bring a dead body back.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, the guy had a stroke or something over there. One time, one person was murdered. It was kind of
jeez.
It's kind of a love thing back and forth, and they got jealous of one love or the other, and he beat him to death with an. I'm not laughing. I didn't just laugh.
Yeah.
They beat him to death with an axe, and then he had to be brought back. And another guy passed away from a heart attack, and we had to bring him back.
Oh man.
So that was pretty somber.
Yeah, I'll bet. And like I said, man, we had to put this thing on really fast. Fortunately, we had a crew or crews that were down there already flying these missions, and we had to call them and go, look, this guy's got to come out in the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
And they told us, they said, we don't know if we're going to be able to make it because of the weather. And sure enough, the airplane went down there. All right. Landed. All right. While they were on the ground, the guy passed away from a heart attack. Yeah. From a heart attack. And so they just said, okay, well, let's wrap his body up and they'll take him back, So
we had to have a crew go over there on an emergency mission and airdrop medicine to them at night. Because one of the scientists I don't know what was wrong with her, and she was the doctor. So she knew what medicine she needed. And it was the first time they ever did this. So because of it's at the poles, the RSs don't work as well. So you have to go into grid mode. And I remember the guy who did this was our chief airdrop pilot for Stanival. So they airdropped medicine to her. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, you don't think of that, man.
Yeah, there's some interesting challenges going there.
Oh, I'll bet. So is there any other bases any other locations that you went to that stand out in your mind other than McMurdo?
McMurdo was probably the number one. When I was having it was my first flight as an aircraft commander, it was a buddy flight. There had been an explosion in Russia that burned a lot of Russians. And so we were going to bring a burn team to Russia. And so the grip and grim people came out and said, "Hey, Captain Nelson, you get to talk to the news." I said, "No, I don't want to talk to the news." I said, "No, you get to talk to the news." I said, I don't want to talk to the news. He
Yeah.
says, "You don't have a choice. General says you're talking to the news." So the major that was with me, I said, "Dude," he's a friend of mine, goes, "I don't want to talk to those people." He goes, "Look, tell them this." And this is during the height of the Cold War. He says,
Yeah.
"Tell them this. This is a great opportunity to improve relations between countries and improve the human condition." But hey, top notch. So that was my famous quote for the day. And that got put in the news, and it wasn't me that did it. So
Yeah.
it was him. And
Interesting.
and then on remember, oh, what was the one with the leader of Panama when we invaded there?
Oh, Noriega. Yeah.
Noriega.
Just cause.
Yeah, just cause. So we flew in a some troops from Fort Ord, and it I mean, you remember behind it was kind of a goat rope. And
It
so
was. It did not go as planned.
no. So we roll in there, and there's a C5 that broke. And so we're lights out. Well, the C5 has all its lights on, and it's like, well, I'm not taxiing near that guy. He's a mortar magnet. And the guy on the ground, I felt badly for him because he didn't have the people he needed. So you've got 141s all over the place. You got C-130s, you got C5s. And I called him, I said, "Where do you want us to go?" And he goes, "Dude, I have no idea." And I said, "Look, let's just," so we kind of got together and said, "Okay, we'll go this way. This guy goes this way." And the crews kind of got together.
Mhm.
And with this guy, we kind of figured it out. Hey, we're going to go over here and there. And they worked it out. And so, and we didn't realize at the time, and we were going to fly near Cuba. And they said, "Okay, you can't fly near Cuba." "Okay, where do you want me to go?" "So go that way." Well, the Cubans had launched MiG-29s. And if we
Yeah.
had gone into their space, they would have shot at us. And
Um,
and then they ran out of flak vests for us. So my classified briefing was in the stairwell at San Antonio Base Ops. And I called the cops and I said, "Can I borrow some of your flak vests?" So they brought some flak vests over. They only had two of them. So me and the co-pilot got one, and we had a third pilot with us on his first flight named Carlos Poveda. So Second Lieutenant Carlos Poveda is sitting between us, and he's got a big grin on his face, and he says, and we're flying into Panama, and he goes, "Hey, sir, how come I don't have a flak vest?" So we ran out, and he goes, "Well, why do you have me sitting between you?" I said, "That's in case a bullet goes up, it'll hit you and not us." And he starts to laugh, and he said, and I said, "Carlos, I'm serious. If you get hit and die, the plane's not going to crash. If we do, the plane's going to crash."
yeah.
And his eyes got really big, and he said, "You serious?" He goes, "I'm completely serious." So he got up to move, and I said, "No, you stay right there."
Yeah.
So so the load came up and put a bunch of chains underneath the seat, so he felt better.
See, isn't that incredible? You know, the crews in the midst of flying the mission come up with some innovative solution. I would never thought of putting chains under Carlos, you know.
Yeah,
So
it's amazing. Um, the military, I got to admit, again, maybe I'm biased, has the smartest people I've ever seen.
oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, we do dumb things, but their ability to be creative, the most professional people I've ever flown with were in combat, just incredible professionalism.
Yeah.
And the ability, well, like when I flew in Iraq and Afghanistan, the ability to do things on the fly, working with the fighter guys, the tanker guys, like one tanker guy, I'll never forget this. I'm flying behind him. Tanker guys are great. So I get behind this guy, and we're passing 6,000 pounds an hour. And I look over the co-pilot, and had fuel for like 10 minutes. He goes, "Hey, Pete, how much do we have?" 20,000 pounds. So I went, 20,000 pounds? And the guy up front says, "Hey, I'm sorry, sir, we don't have the pumps." And I said, "What?" He says, "I'll hang on to you as long as you need me." That guy hung with me for a half hour
Wow. To give you gas.
to give me gas. And another time, I couldn't find my tanker. And I called and I said, "Colin, I'll take it. Is there anybody out there with gas? I need 60,000 pounds." And Mobile 51 calls and he says, "Hey, where are you?" I said, "I'm over the Black Sea." And he goes, "Stay there." And this guy my tanker didn't show up. This guy comes out of nowhere, does a turning rejoin, gives me 60,000 pounds of gas and saves my butt.
Oh, the
Just,
Black Sea. What were you doing over the Black Sea?
that's where we got our gas en route to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Oh, that's right.
the tanker guys were fantastic.
Yeah,
The
we're kind
now,
of used to being on the end of the whip, you know?
well, you know, we can't talk about some of the stuff we talked about over the radio. That's, you know, some of those conversations are kind of classified, but those guys were fantastic.
Yeah. And you know what? That's kind of one of the characteristics of the tanker community is they're very, very flexible. And you know how many fighter guys have told me, Bill, why is it you guys know what's going to happen before we do? You know, why is it you tanker guys can listen to the radio and figure out, oh, we need to be over here before we realize we need to be over here, you know? And I've had,
I think it's because of your job,
yeah, it
what you
is.
guys know.
It truly is. And that has improved a lot since our weapons school was instituted too. We've
Well,
got,
I remember when a buddy of mine got tankers and he was disappointed. And he says, well, I got tankers. And I said, do you realize even to get to tankers, you had to beat out 90% of the people that applied to pilot training?
yeah,
And he kind of sat back and I said, do you realize the job you do? I guarantee you, if you walk into a bar with fighter pilots, with any other pilot, you will never buy a drink. I
never.
guarantee it.
I've never bought a drink. You know, and of course, everybody, all right, Sluggo, what are you drinking? What are you drinking, Sluggo? I don't know how many times guys have said, okay, yeah, you know, and you and I are both LDS, and so that's the other funny part too is they always hand me the keys. Okay, Sluggo, get us home
Yes.
tonight. You know, get us
Yeah.
home tonight. But yeah, I've never been at a place where there's a preponderance of fighter guys and I had to buy a drink. It was always Sluggo, what are you drinking? Sluggo, what are you drinking?
Yeah. I
You
got to
know,
drink a lot of 7 Up.
mine was caffeine-free Diet Coke with lime.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. I
caffeine-free.
remember my, my dad told me a story when he was in Vietnam. You know, his call sign was nasty because he didn't smoke, drink, cheat on his wife or anything like that. So they called him nasty. And, and, I was able to get more stories from him before he passed away. And I think he was in Japan and
Mhm.
you know, his buddies, and you know, I guess what went TDY stayed TDY, but he told me this story. His buddies were out not behaving as well as they should. And so he went there because he was the XO of the squadron and wanted to keep it
Yeah.
safe. And they said, so he's sitting there drinking his ginger ale is what he drank. And
Yeah.
they told one of the girls to go sit on his lap. And so she went around sat on his lap, he dumped her on the ground. And he
Yep.
stood up and goes, don't ever do that to me again. I went over to those guys and said, I get along with you guys great, but don't you ever do that to me again, and walked out.
I had the same situation, you know, in Osan, Korea.
Yeah.
You know, you've been to Korea, you know exactly what I'm talking
Yes,
about, the mama
I do.
sans and everything, you know,
Yeah.
and just say, no, sorry. And the great thing was you got tested often, but once you
Yeah.
told them, I ain't doing that, they, the crews would say, hey, Mark, we're going to go be doing this tonight. You might want to find something else to do. They take
Yes.
care of you. They take care of it. So, all right. So now you go from C-141s to C-17s. All
Mhm.
right. What was that introduction like? Okay. Because now you're flying like almost a freaking brand new airplane.
It it's a quantum leap in technology. Quantum leap. And I never swear. You know that.
Yeah.
And I'm in the fourth sim and I'm trying to learn how to operate this new mode control panel, tying it into the flight management computer,
Yeah.
tying it into the auto throttles, tying it to the automation system. And I'm like 30 miles behind the sim. And I get so frustrated and I never swear. And everybody in my squadron knows I never swear. So I look at the instructor and I go, stop the sim. I don't know what the F I'm doing. And everybody goes completely quiet. And I went, I'm sorry, guys. I'm really, really sorry. And they thought at that time, yeah, maybe we ought to slow down a little bit. But it's the C-17 is an absolute blast to fly.
Yeah.
A great airplane. You when you went on night vision goggles, you flip a switch up here, and the whole plane went night vision goggle capable.
Wow. I didn't
And
know that.
yes, it was perfect for MVGs.
Yeah.
And the one story I remember, a couple of them, we were going off out of Mosul. We were spiraling into Mosul. And the co-pilot, we saw two lights streak by our flight deck. And she goes, Bill, did we get shot at? And I went, oh, it looked like 23 millimeter, but doggone it, I don't want to say anything. It's too much paperwork. And so we landed, and Intel says, did you guys get shot at? And I looked at her, and she looks at me, and we went, no, we didn't get shot at. So no, we didn't. We thought we did, but we didn't. So we let that go. And then I think there was another one. We're taking off out of Bagram, and we're spiraling up.
Yeah.
And the anti-missile system, you have to turn it off at a certain altitude, or it will catch reflections off the clouds and do a simulated missile launch on you.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so it'll pop flares. So I'm spiraling up, and I had never shot flares.
Mhm.
So the guy behind me, okay, turn the missile warning system off at X altitude. And he was the vice ops group commander.
Mhm.
So and I won't say his name, good guy.
Yeah.
So he's sitting back, okay, remember, turn this off. And we spiral up, and all of a sudden I see a big flash and a rumble. And I hear missile launch, missile launch. I thought, crap, which engine? And I, in the back of me, hear, oh man, Bill, I'm really sorry. And I went, Steve. And I look at him, and I said, okay, bring me my brown flight suit. So we worked that one out. And then the last mission, we're coming into Bagram. We're coming in low level inside a mountain range, and you have a HUD on the C-17.
Yeah, really
and
nice one.
It is. It's a great HUD.
Really nice.
And you can place the flight path vector on the top of your target, and you'll clear that target. So and I'm coming off MVGs. I place the FPV on top of mountain range. I pop the mountain range, go to 45 degrees of crank, pull everything down, and do a tactical arrival into a short landing into Bagram. And I remember coming to a stop, and I look at that guy and I go, man, I love this job. But I think the worst one was, I'll give you a couple stories.
Okay.
My first mission, I'm sitting on the flight deck, and I see someone walking on the dike wearing camouflage. And I thought, okay, he's not going to be dumb enough to come up onto the ramp. And he keeps coming. And I see him holding something in his hand that's tin with a antenna on it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope this dude's not going to blow up. And so I walk outside, and the Ravens are with us. And I said, hey, go get this guy. And so I back away in case he blows up. He doesn't blow me up, but I pull my gun on him. And what he was a 16-year-old Afghani kid that was wearing borrowed camouflage, carrying his only transistor radio, who had lost his pass to get on base. Oh. So he thought he'd go in the back way. So I end up taking a picture next to him, giving a pack of gum to a 16-year-old kid I almost shot.
Oh, jeez.
And then the one thing that kind of messed with my head, this is way after the war was over. Remember when we left Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Okay, I actually got to talk to some of the crew on that. And they were showing pictures of that, and I came in and watched it, and Jennifer says, okay, you need to walk outside of the room. And I said, why? He goes, you don't want to see this. And then when I saw that we had left, and we had left Americans behind, and I get kind of emotional about this, yeah. I don't care if you die, you don't leave Americans behind. You don't do that. And I got to admit, that messed up. It took her a little while to calm me down, and I could understand completely how my father felt after Vietnam.
Yeah, there's iconic video, of that C-17 taxiing out with all those people around it, yes. And everything, and seeing that picture, you're like going, no, really, we didn't just do this, did we? Yeah.
Well, I had some friends ask me, so why didn't they stop for those Afghans? I said, you can't. I said, you can't. I said, no. What if you run them over? Then you run them over.
You run them over.
I said, the back of that plane was filled with a record number of people. And I said, you don't have a choice. Well, you could have gotten more. No, you couldn't. You had to take off. And I said, it's not only the people, but that's a $240 million asset. If you lose that, think of what the Taliban could have done with that.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it would have been like being that crew.
I can, because I talked to the pilot at the Airlift Tanker Association. And
I can't imagine having to make that decision.
It was emotional. we both were emotional,
I can imagine.
you know, because you can imagine that cruise like going, we were only able to save these 800 and however many. It was 863 or so. It was an astronomical
Wow,
number.
that's
All
incredible.
right. But he said, and I think his co-pilot was a gal, they just said, we're going to the end of the runway. We're going to take off. And whatever happens, happens. We're not stopping. We're not stopping. Okay. And of course, there was a lot of emotion in the cockpit when they did leave, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
They did not know that they had hangers on. And, but I will tell you one funny story about this. C-17 was leaving Kandahar at 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was a Charleston C-17. And the loadmasters were like, stop, 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 stop. You know, at 1 o'clock, 1:15 in the morning as they're taxiing out. And like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? He goes, I got to open the hatch. I got to open the hatch. You know, I'll be right back. And they're like, be right back. What are you talking about? All right. And so they see that, you know, they can tell the hatch is open. Obviously, there's, you know, indications in the cockpit the hatch is open. And of course, the pilot's like, what's going on back here behind me? Sees the guy run out, goes to the end of the runway sign, okay, that says, here's the runway, you know,
Oh,
empty
yes,
frat.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. And yanks it, he and another buddy yank it out of the dirt and then run back on, close everything all up, and off they go. So when they had the Gail Halverson Candy Bomber Memorial here,
Yes. Mhm.
they changed the name to one of the C-17s that was involved in that refugee mission to the Spirit of the Candy Bomber. They had that sign in the back of the airplane. And I had to ask him, I said, okay, what's the end of the runway sign here? And the guy says, I was the loadmaster on this. I'm not the guy that pulled it out, but I was one of the loadmasters on this mission. And he told me the story, you know, and
I'd heard about that.
yeah. So all of the crews that were involved, okay, you know, there were had reach call signs, had moose call signs. All of the crews had signed that. It was like a day glow red, day glow orange. I mean, it was really bright with the runways, you know, on it. They'd all signed it and had brought it out there to kind of show everybody off and talk about the mission and everything like that. And I understand talking to the squadron commander, who was the squadron commander and was the deployed squadron commander that was flying these missions, that the Advar Hazy Museum called him and says, we want that. And that's where it is now.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, that's where it is now. The Advar Hazy Museum, Smithsonian called him up and said, hey, we've heard this story. We'd really like to have that piece of memorabilia, you know, for the War on Terror section and everything like that. And they said, you know what, that's probably a good place for it. I've got a picture of it. I took it when I was, because you see that thing, Bill, and you're like, what the heck? What's that end of runway sign doing it in the C-17? And it's all signed, okay, you know, Moose 5-6 in the crew, you know,
Yeah.
Reach whatever in the crew. And I asked the loadmaster, and he told me the story. He says, yeah, the pilot's like going, would somebody go get him and bring him back on the airplane? You know, but when he pulled that thing out, you know, he realized we were the very last airplane going into Kandahar.
That's right.
We were the very last one to come in. We were the very last one to leave. And now
And
we've got that time.
that's where my son was based when he was over there, was in Kandahar.
Was he?
Yeah.
Now you leave the military and you go into what I would probably call one of the best jobs an instructor pilot could have. You get hired by Boeing.
Mhm. Again, I was really, really fortunate. I had in my patriarchal blessing, it's interesting. It says friends will be raised up to help you in needy times. I actually had a friend, and I had an interview with American Airlines.
Uh-huh.
And another buddy of mine said, hey, there's this job at Boeing that I think you'd like. And I'm not really interested. And our DO, the squadron, said, you know, Bill, you'd be good for this job. Apply for it. No, I really don't want to. Look, I'll help you put your resume together. Okay, what the heck? So I sent it in.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that from 100 and some odd people that apply, only 5 got selected.
Wow.
And I got selected as a simulator and a flight instructor.
Mhm.
And during the 20 years I was with Boeing, yeah, Boeing has its challenges now. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
But as a job, it was an absolute dream job. It was a great job.
Ah,
And I got to fly everything Boeing built. I got to be in the test program for the 747 and 78. I got to be known as a flight test captain in the 74. I got to fly with about 30 different airlines. I got to travel over the world as an instructor. It was, and pay was good, benefits were good. Like I said, Boeing has its issues,
yeah.
but it was a great job.
So you've flown all these different airplanes at Boeing. Which one did you like the most?
For cool points, it's a
Yeah.
747, just because it's cool to fly something that big.
Fly the Queen. Yeah. Flying
I,
the
I,
Queen.
I've
Queen of the
flown those
skies. Yeah.
exactly. I've flown that one weighed 1 million pounds. So that I got to do that.
How much?
1 million. We took one off and weighed 1 million pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing airplane. It's an amazing airplane.
So
The
was this a Dash 8?
It was a Dash 8.
Was
Yeah.
it with the new engines? Man,
Yeah,
that's a heavy. That's freaking heavy.
it's just amazing how well the plane flies. We
Wow.
were when we transitioned from flying the 400 to the Dash 8, the 400 burned 20,000 pounds an hour.
Yeah.
The 8 burned 16,000 pounds. And I remember we were flying along and we were 747 guys thinking, wow, 16,000 pounds an hour, we're just sipping gas.
16,000 pounds an hour. That's crazy, man. How much does it hold?
I think it could, boy, it's been so long, 5 or 600,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
know to start and taxi. I remember I figured this out one time. To start the engines and taxi them could refuel your car for I think 60 years, something
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
But just a great, enjoyable plane to fly was the 777-300. And then for just gee whiz was the
Yeah.
787. 787 is an incredible airplane.
Talk about the avionics in that, because that was a really big change in um, an airline avionics package. Okay. Because I was working at Rockwell.
Yeah,
And as a matter of fact, I know the guy, the Rockwell engineer that put the 787 cockpit together.
he did a good job.
I know he did. This guy's really smart too, you know.
It was a flying Ethernet, as you know.
Mhm.
Electric brakes, electric engine start. The generators were insane, 90 kVi.
Oh my God.
I mean, 90 kVA. They said that a 787 generated enough power to power a city of a town of 30,000, something like that.
Yeah.
5,000 PSI hydraulics, pressurized down to 6,000 feet. It humidified the air. It had a HUD. It was a
Yeah.
fly-by-wire system. Just an absolute joy to fly. Really, really easy airplane to fly.
And you and I were talking the other day about the heads-up guidance system, the HUD and the airliners, and I mentioned to you I'd flown into Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Talk about the
Yeah.
HUD for just a minute, because this is a really unique piece of equipment that's on, believe it or not, a lot of airplanes now do have it. Even the
Yes.
executive jets have that. Okay. When you hook it up to the enhanced vision system and everything, talk about that for just a moment, because this is really an incredible piece of equipment.
This HUD had several modes. So it had a VMC mode, IMC mode, that had what's known as an A3I mode, which you could do Cat 3 auto landings. And what that would do is change the symbology. And then what it did is it was called you wanted to bury the worm. And on the left side of that, it would have an arrow pointing to bars which showed what your deviation was on your airspeed. So all you did was bury the worm. And then put Miss Piggy on the dance floor. What you do is you put your flight path vector on the horizon line.
Yeah.
And so as long as you did that, and it gave you guidance on how to do that,
Yeah.
another thing it would do is you could not stall it. If you turned off the auto throttles and let go of and turned off the autopilot and tried to stall it, the the auto throttles would come on automatically. It was called auto throttle wake up. I was a sim demo pilot, and I would take it up to 30,000 feet, flip it upside down and let the controls go. It would right itself. And so you could be flying along an alpha like this,
Yeah.
and the plane would recognize that and bring the thrust levers back up.
Jeez.
So it could make, the only problem was they could make a really bad pilot look really good because it covered your mistakes.
Yeah.
But if something went wrong, like you had an overheat,
Yeah.
the plane would start fixing itself. Then you would get an ICAS message, and then the checklist would automatically come up. And the checklist would say, this is the checklist we've done. This is what the airplane's done. This is what you need to do. If you missed a step, it told you. Said, okay, you missed a step, go back here.
Mhm.
And then as you did the steps, then it would tell you which steps you had done. If you weren't done, it would tell you, hey, you got to go back and finish this step.
Yeah. Really
It was
smart airplane.
very, very smart airplane.
Really smart airplane. Okay. And, of course, it's got the panels all across with the
Oh, yeah.
synthetic vision, the enhanced synthetic vision, it has all the terrain and everything around you. Nuts. Yeah, my buddy Bruce Ray was one of the engineers at Rockwell on that cockpit avionics package, and we actually had it in a simulator. I got to go fly it into Jackson Hole one day, and being able to see through a snowstorm the runways and everything at Jackson Hole was incredible. Of course, it's a big piece of glass like this, all right?
Yeah.
But what was crazy about it was you had all that information, everything right there in front of you. But on the outside, it looked like you were making the jump to light speed, because it's in a snowstorm, So
I mean, it was like giving it someone like me a Christmas present. I went in there and my wife says I love to touch buttons. So matter of fact, our first date, this is kind of like legend in the family. We're tooling along on my little car, and I've been single for a while, and she reaches over and touches the radio. And she says I gave her a death stare. I looked at her and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm just turning the radio down so we could talk." And I said, "You touched my side of the car." And
what did Jen say?
She goes, "What?" And I said, "You touched my side of the flight deck." She busts up laughing and she goes, "If you want this relationship to last, you're going to have to change that attitude."
That's hilarious. Don't touch my side of the cockpit. That's funny. Now, obviously, you said you flew with like 30 different nations. Is there one in particular that you enjoyed flying with the most?
The Australians.
Really?
Aren't
they great? Aren't they great?
We were flying along with the Australians, and the guy looks at me and starts laughing, and I go, "What?" And he goes, "You realize we're the only guys to get kicked out of England, and look how well we did."
Get kicked out of England? What
Yeah,
happened?
the Australians were prisoners.
That's right. Okay.
And we left us, and we're known as colonials.
Yeah.
So no, the Australians are an absolute blast.
So what equipment were you teaching them how to fly? Was it 787s?
This was 737s.
73s?
737s with those guys. I got to be the instructor for the chief pilot for United.
Yeah.
Great guy, super guy.
Yeah.
Got to deliver the second 787 to Air India. That made a big thing out of that. Delivered a bunch to China, flew with the Chinese. Chinese are great guys. I was flying with one first officer and I hear him humming. And we're in China. And I said, "What are you humming?" It was a Christian song. I said, I thought you couldn't do that. And he goes, "No, we do that."
Interesting.
And then I was instructing another guy in 777s, and we were done. And I said, "Hey, I'll take you out to dinner." You guys said, "Well, where do you want to go?" He goes, "Pizza Hut." I said, "Of all the places to go, you want to go to Pizza Hut?" And I said, "Okay, we'll go to Pizza Hut." And so we're there, and he's saying, and of course, again, I'm not going to reveal too much about it, but he was saying how he didn't particularly enjoy living where he lived. And I looked at him, I said, if you're going to leave your country, don't do it with me around. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble if you do.
Yeah.
And I got called into the boss's office a week later, and he said, "Did you take the Chinese out to dinner?" And I went, "Sure. It was on my dime. Didn't cost you anything." And I said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because they're from a communist country and that could get us in trouble." But, oh, okay, I won't do that again.
Okay. That's interesting.
That was
Wow.
interesting.
But see, obviously they had to know your background. Okay.
They did.
They knew you were an Air Force pilot at one point. I would think that would be a very long conversation. You know, hey, what
We,
was it like flying in the Air Force, United States Air Force? Because, you know, our country teaches us that you're the enemy, your country teaches we're the enemy, and we're just flying, instructing, having a great time here, you know?
that's the interesting point. Is I flew with Russians.
Hmm.
Uh, Russians are okay. They're a little too serious sometimes. That they're huge competition with the U.S.
Yeah.
And they always wanted me to drink, which no one can outdrink Russians. I never tried because I don't drink. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. When I was in China, loved it, had a great time. And when you're just regular people, none of the political stuff matters. You're just friends.
Yeah.
And I was flying with the Chinese again, and the flight attendant comes up and says something in Chinese, and the co-pilot and first officer goes, "Yeah, she's upset because the guy in back's drunk and he's kind of getting handsy with her." I said, "Okay, kick him off." And so she goes, "Okay." So she goes in back, comes back up and says, "Well, he's behaving himself now because she's a little nervous. He's a VIP." I said, "Okay, don't kick him off." So she comes back later and says, "Well, he's at it again, doing all this in Chinese." And I said, "You know what? Tell him the American up front is kicking him off because I'm a Boeing employee."
Yeah.
And so she says something, she giggles, says something in Chinese, and literally skips out the door. And he starts to laugh. And I said, "What was that about?" And she says, "So she looked at you, she said, 'Cool.'" And she, because the flight attendants there, they get manhandled by
Do
some of those
they?
passengers. And of course, by
Yeah.
Americans, we don't put up with that.
No.
And I booted out several passengers because they got that way. And she was blown away that I would stick up for her. And I told her, I said, "No one manhandles my flight attendants. I don't care who you are, and
Or what country we're flying in.
or what country." And they were afraid that the person could do something to them. And I said, "No, I'm an American. You can't do anything to me. Kick him off." And it made her day. So, but yeah, Chinese were great. There really wasn't, well, there was one country I didn't like flying with. I'm not going to say anything. And they're
Yeah.
an ally of ours, but
Yeah.
terrible pilots, didn't want to study. Um, I got to be friends with one, but
Yeah.
it's just a different kind of attitude.
That's too
So,
bad.
but
That's
the
too bad.
rest of them never had a problem. Got along with them really well.
Yeah.
Really good guys.
You-
I flew princes around. I flew the King of Jordan around. Um, I flew some generals around.
yeah.
Just regular guys.
Everybody that has told me that has ever met the King of Jordan loves him. Just a
He's
just a great guy, common guy. Yeah, okay, I'm a king of a country, but you know what? I'm just, and I understand he's a good pilot too.
he's a super pilot.
Is he?
Yes, you could always tell when he was on board. If he was on board by himself, it was KFC, Burger King, stuff like that. If his wife was on board, it was healthy food. Okay, the King's on board this time, and then we're waiting for him, and
Yeah,
I'm instructing for the Jordanian Air Force when they get
yeah,
their brand new 737, and
yeah.
this limo comes up, and then the driver gets out, and he's wearing a black T-shirt. On the back of his T-shirt, it says police, and he goes and picks up the royal baby from the Queen. And I thought, no one's allowed to touch the
Ooh,
royal baby. What is this guy
yeah.
doing? It was the King.
With a police shirt on?
Yeah, he wanted to drive himself. And he has a Harley, right?
No, I did not know that.
He was gifted a Harley, I think, from President Bush.
Yeah.
And one of our pilots saw the motorcade come up, and this rockin' dude come up on a Harley. And it's the King.
That's funny.
Very, very classy guy, really nice guy, but you can tell he understands the power he has, but he knows how to treat people.
Yeah.
I
See,
never met him personally, but a good guy.
yeah. We had forces in Jordan out there in the thumb at Shahid Mafwak
Yeah.
during the Iraqi freedom, the initial stages. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And everybody out there told us, hey, he's dealing with his people. Some of the people don't want us here, but every time he comes by, everybody loves him because he's just such a down to earth guy.
Yeah,
He's
he's
such a
very,
down to earth guy.
very, very well respected.
Yeah. And not just in his country, but throughout the Middle East,
Right.
throughout the
Well,
entire Middle East.
it's interesting. When I was in the hotel in Jordan, they had us under guard. We couldn't just leave the hotel, things like that. So I'm in the weight room lifting, and I'm wearing a shirt from my squadron. I didn't think anybody's going to recognize that shirt.
Yeah.
And this kind of short, kind of dumpy guy with a beard comes up and he goes, "Are you American military?" And I went, alarms go off and go, what do you want to know? Goes, "Oh, I'm the former Jordanian chief of staff of the Air Force."
Oh, really?
The youngest to play F-16s. So we got to be friends. I mean,
Yeah.
nicest guy, nice, this little short, fat guy with a beard.
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm the Jordanian chief of staff of the Air Force." "Oh yes, sir." So,
Yeah. Everybody
so
that's
we
been to
got, I
Jordan.
got to talk C-17. Yeah, I got to talk C-17s. You got to talk F-16s.
Oh,
So
that's cool. That's cool. Hey, I don't know if you've heard about this, but in April when they had the mass launch of cruise missiles and drones and ballistic missiles
uh-huh.
from Iran, the
Yeah.
F-15E Strike Eagles that were at Shahid Mafwak basically made a wall of eagles and shot a bunch of them down. There's a crew that was stationed there at Shahid Mafwak in Jordan, um, a pilot and the whistle. They got silver stars. It's an amazing story, and when you and I talk sometime offline, I'll tell you about this. I'm going to do a podcast on this because the stories that are coming out of this is just they shot down 60 vehicles that night. 60.
Can you tell me what they were using?
AIM-9X.
A
Predominant,
9X?
predominantly AIM-9X. Yeah, sidewinders. Yeah, predominantly
Wow, I
sidewinder.
didn't know they had that I didn't know they had that capability.
The Block 2s do, okay? Because one of the requirements for the Block 2 version of the missile was being able to discern cruise missiles and drones. And
Oh wow.
I've actually got to shoot them in an F-18 Super Hornet simulator at Oceana.
How was that?
And oh, dude, it was amazing. The missile is freaking amazing. Okay. They got some of them with, radar guided AMRAAMs and stuff like that too. But this crew actually, I think they tried to gun two of them too. They actually ran out of missiles and then were on NVGs and were gunned one and tried to gun a second one, and I don't think it worked out, but yeah, they were actually flying four AMRAAMs, four AIM-9Xs, and a loaded gun. And the gun in the Strike Eagle doesn't carry a lot of bullets. It doesn't carry a lot of rounds. But there was a wall of like 8 Eagles, across Jordan and part of Syria knocking these things down. It's an amazing story. And
But that would be every fighter pilot's dream.
well, it's fascinating you say that because I went to Tailhook this year and got to listen to um, Admiral Mark Miguez, STEM Miguez, who
Uh-huh.
was the battle group commander
Yep.
for the Eisenhower. Because you remember, you heard all this stuff in the news. Oh, the Eisenhower's been hit by a cruise missile, all this kind of stuff,
Yes.
And he's like going, no, sorry about that. And one of his commanders of one of his squadrons goes, "There's no greater morale boost than launching off 5-minute alert to trigger squeeze." Okay. And he got like 3 of them. Okay. They would have airplanes on alert, ready to go. And they had a new configuration that they had on the Super Hornets. They call it the Murder Hornet. It's carrying 4 AIM-9Xs, 5 AMRAAMs, and then the targeting pod. Okay. And
Good heavens.
there was airplanes coming home, with like just 1 or 2 missiles left. And predominantly AIM-9X was the weapon of choice. Isn't that interesting?
I
But
mean,
they were flying out
I
of
knew
Jordan.
I've read some of the history on it. I knew it was capable, but I didn't know it was that capable.
Oh, my last job was Air Force Operational Test and Evaluation Center. Here's how this conversation went, Bill. Sluggo, you've got all joint weapons. Sir, I'm a tanker guy. I've never dropped a bomb, shot a missile, shot a gun in my entire career. Yeah, but you went through weapons school. You got all joint weapons. I said, okay. And one of the first middle envelopes I opened was AIM-9X Block 2. And of course, it's a Navy run program back from Virginia Beach. And so when I went back once, the program manager, Navy F-18 Wizzo from Super Hornets, I told him, I says, hey, give me an hour of sim time. Let's go shoot some of these things, so I can see what they do. He goes, you got it. So for an hour, we got to do that. And
you had to.
I had to. Yeah, it was part of my job.
Well, I appreciate the sacrifice.
Yeah, it's part of my job. Okay. But the really interesting thing was they didn't know this, but when I was teaching at the Joint Forces Staff College, I had an F-14 Rio that, to maintain some semblance of currency, all he had to do was fly the sim. Okay. But he couldn't fly the sim because he's a Rio and he needed a pilot. So guess who he took with him?
You're kidding me.
F-14D models, to be exact. Okay. And so he taught me how to land on the ship. All right. And when we were flying this one mission in the F-18 Super Hornet, I came right around 800 feet, did the brake, came in, hooked a 3-wire, first try and everything. And the instructor, the Super Hornet instructor, because he had 2 students that were going through the replacement air group. And he goes, wait, what? You're a tanker guy? And then he looks at his 2 students. If he can do it, you guys should be able to do it. It's just pretty funny.
Have you ever heard of a focus missile?
Yeah, I have, actually.
Yeah, my dad was carrying one in Vietnam. He was one of the first guys to do that. And he was hunting along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and fired a focus missile at a truck and hit the truck. So this story sums up my dad's attitude really well. So he goes in and the admiral comes in and he goes, Commander Nelson, what are you doing firing a $150,000 missile at a $3,000 truck? He says, Admiral, if you don't want me to shoot it, don't stick it on my airplane.
Yeah.
And turned around and walked out.
And I'm sure the admiral went, that's pretty sound logic.
Well, the unfortunate part is about Dad is I was starting to get some stories out of him before he passed away, and he told Jen some stories.
Yeah.
The mistake I made, I have his ribbon rack.
Yeah.
And I actually had to search around to find his citations because he hid them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got some interesting stories out of him before he passed away.
Did you find the citations?
Yes.
Oh, those must be interesting to read.
I mean, he got one for blowing up an oil conduit, like his wingman. We knew Dick Couch. Dick Couch was a former football player from the Navy Academy.
Yeah.
He was just one of our buddies.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that was our dad's wingman. And then he was protecting a bunch of South Vietnamese troops against an NV regiment. And this one I had to dig through because he was proud of what he did, but didn't necessarily like what he did.
Yeah.
And then he took the whole regiment out, got a medal for that. And then one of the last stories he told me, it was he was leading an alpha strike. And there's a new guy, just got out of the rag, coming over the beach. And he says, okay, everybody green up. So they all greened up, and he, green up. We're not at the, Commander Nelson, we're not at the target. He goes, just green up. He goes, ready, drop. And everybody drops on the beach and in a blanket. And he says, everybody's going home. So everybody turns around and goes back to the ship. He was really aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very aggressive in his job.
Yeah.
But his people were really, people worshiped him as a squadron commander. Because he made them do their job, and he would never make them do anything he wouldn't do.
Yeah.
But his people were very important to him.
Yeah. What a great leadership lesson,
He was. He was in the bishop, state presidency, all that. Little 5'8" guy who came lived my grandparents. He had a rough upbringing, was homeless for a while. met my mom at a USO dance, and she wanted nothing to do with them. But cocky little guy, when
I
he
met your
told me,
dad at our commissioning. I remember when we got commissioned, I met your dad.
yes,
He was there.
that's right. That's the last time he wore his whites.
Yeah, he was the only person in white
Yeah,
at our graduation. I remember that.
yeah. I was very fortunate. I had a good family.
Yeah,
The interesting thing is as tough as he was, my mother was his life.
yeah.
When she passed away, he passed away within about 4 months.
I did
And
not know that.
yeah, when he couldn't live with her. Jen went and spent time with him because she was a hospice nurse,
Yeah.
and she was talking with him, and my mom came to visit him, and then Jen went outside, and so mom in spirit visited him, and Jen said, "Okay, I'll just go outside." And then mom left, and Jen came back inside, and Dad said, "I want her to come back." And mom actually said before she left, she says, "Tom, I'm going to go to prepare a way for us. You'll be with me soon."
Hmm.
And so he really, really missed her. And he was talking to Jen, and he says, "I just want to see my wife."
Yeah.
And Jen said, "You will." And then he was kind of struggling a little bit, and she was talking with, he goes, "Tom, if you want to go, you can go."
Yeah.
And he says, "Can I go see Jean?" He goes, "Yes." And then she didn't come from a military family, but she understood that. She goes, "Nasty, I release you from duty, call the ball." And I get kind of choked up over this, and he passed away within a few minutes.
Wow.
And before he passed away, my mom saw him, and Jen didn't know. Jen had
Yeah.
never met my brother or my nephew or
Yeah.
my sister. And they visited him before he passed away.
Yeah.
And she didn't even know their names. And she came and told me. And the fascinating thing was, he had just barely met Jen, and we were sleeping in the living room, and he had a nightmare. And you know whose name he called? Jen's.
Wow.
He didn't call
Interesting.
for me. He didn't call for my brother. He said, I heard him kind of rustling around. He goes, "Dad," he goes, "Jen, I need Jen." I said, "Dad," he goes, "I need Jen." And in just a couple of years he knew her, they developed a really, really
Yeah.
strong relationship. Absolutely adored her, and she adored him.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, if I tick her off, she says, "What would your dad say if he saw you do this?"
Imagine that. Well,
But
brother,
yeah,
we've had a
I
great time talking, man.
I really, Mark, you have no idea what this means to me to be able to do this. This is quite an honor for me.
Well, you know what the crazy thing is you and I could probably go on for another 2 hours
Oh, we could easily.
easily. Okay. But we're at a 2 hour point, and I told you
Okay,
2 hours. Okay.
thank you.
So, hey, I really appreciate you spending time with me today, man.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
you bet. Want you to know I love you guy, like a brother.
Love you too,
Your your
brother.
your friendship means a lot to me.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And we're going to be up to Fairchild here pretty soon. So I may need a place to stay with my wife. Okay.
I think we can do that.
I think you can do that. All right,
Hey,
brother.
say
Huh?
hello to Val and the kids for me.
I sure will.
You have a great evening, Mark.
Folks, I hope you really enjoyed that episode. That was a lot of fun. And I heard some things that he and I had never talked about. And that's truly why I do this show, because we're leaving a legacy of stories and lessons learned, because I believe every lesson learned is a problem solved. And I want to seriously capture as many lessons learned from as many of these people as I can that are pilot maintainers and aviators from all over the world and share them with you. This episode is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, which I wrote and published in 2017. 22 chapters give you a behind the scenes look at global air refueling in Desert Storm, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and a couple of contingency operations that I was involved with. Now you can buy them on Amazon. Hardbacks are all gone. Can't buy those anymore. But we just recently reprinted them. I have copies that have color pictures in them, not black and white, like if you buy it on Amazon. The best thing about this is All of the proceeds go to the Airlift Tanker Association's Heritage Foundation. So it's a tax write-off. Please contact me through my website, links below, and I'll be happy to send you a signed copy of my book, Tanker Pilot. And I don't just sign my name to it. I actually write a personal note in every one of them. The $27 covers the cost of the book, which is $20, and $7 for postage and handling. Folks, I really appreciate you joining me. My YouTube channel is now over 205,000 subscribers. And yesterday we went over 150 million views. So thank you, folks. Thank you for supporting me. If you want to support me monetarily, I have my Venmo and my PayPal below. You can send me a super thanks through the YouTube channel. But if you just want to contribute to the show to help us keep going, send us whatever you want through my Venmo and my PayPal link below. Next week's show, we have an MQ-9 Predator operator. And I say operator because he's been both an enlisted sensor operator and got his degree, went through pilot training, and is now flying them. And he answers the question, what does the MQ-9 do? And talks a little bit about this drone stuff going on around the United States. So join us next week for episode 98 of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. Thanks, folks, for joining me. Please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. Give me a super thanks. Or if you just want to contribute to the show, my Venmo and my PayPal links are below. Have a great week. Hope you all are having a happy new year. Sluggo, signing out here.